Alright, today, Brewmaster talk. We're going to nerd out about this class for a little bit. I've been doing a fair bit of testing on beta so far over the course of this week. Not as much as I'd like to. I was hoping to get to a lot of the other tanks as well, but this weekend kind of tied me up for a lot of other reasons. So let's just kind of nerd out. Feel free to use timestamps down below to skip around if there's any certain section. I want to talk about some of the bugged and or fixed talents that we've seen changed this week, or not changed, I guess. And then we'll do kind of just like a commentary talk walkthrough with some footage and stuff. So hopefully you guys kick back, relax, and yeah, let's just nerd out for a bit. So first things first, let's talk about some talents that were bugged and are now working. So the first thing I want to talk about is actually going to be Swift as a coursing river. So this talent was changed and has been updated. In the last video, I was mentioning that it wasn't proccing off of every single brew, which arguably problematic. It should be in theory an uptime. It was also a tooltip error because it's saying drinking from a brew, but not all brews were granting it, therefore it wasn't true. So now when I pop fortifying brew, you're going to see that it's going to be gained. Let's remove it. Celestial brew's popped. Here it is once again. We'll remove that. We'll pop Black Ox brew. Once again, we're seeing Swift as a coursing river. And of course, this all works with purifying brew as well. So that's all good and kosher. Now my only issue is outside of maybe single target damage and raid encounters, this feels like it really won't make that big of an impact in Mythic Plus when it comes to flurry strikes. The idea is there. It's like, okay, increase attack speed, which means more flurry strike charge generation, which means more damage with, flurry strikes and shadow over the battlefield. But in practice, it doesn't necessarily feel that great. Like, you can't notice a difference between running it and not in Mythic Plus. So chances are it's more of a raid talent, I would say, to get more auto attack damage, and maybe the occasional for extra flurry strike. But outside of that, it seems like we're probably gonna ignore it. One other talent that I was really bummed wasn't currently working was Silent Sanctuary. It has now been fixed and updated. So if we open up my combat log here, I'll pop an expel harm so you can see. There's kind of the split. Every 3 seconds, we're getting healed for 9k. Now, I do have 600,000 health, but Silent Sanctuary not only can crit, like you just see right here, it can also proc on Celestial Fortune, which means that you can kind of double dip in a way with your crit. So if your crit's high enough, ideally 30 plus, if you can get it there. The first season, it might be difficult to. You're going to be getting a fair bit of healing while kiting or running from pack to pack, a little bit of recovery. Just overall, a nice little additional element to the Brewmaster's ability to kind of self-sustain between packs. Now, one thing that is, I don't know if this is a bug, because, okay, so still step coil, leg sweep applies disable for 5 seconds when it ends. Now, I've talked about this before, really quick. If you don't know, disable reduces a target's movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds, and melee attacks refresh the dot. So basically, or I guess snare, it's not really a dot, but you essentially, when you leg sweep a pack, it'll apply disable once the leg sweep ends. So we'll come in here, we'll slam a leg sweep. Once this ends, you'll see disable for 5 seconds. But then when we start using our abilities, you're going to see that now disable lasts for 15 seconds. So it's like, because it's sharing the same ID, it's essentially AoE applying disable to everything. And it's not resetting to 5 seconds. It's not, the fact that it's resetting is crazy. But then it's also applying it back to 15 seconds, which means that once you leg sweep, mobs are just slowed. They're locked down, which I really like. I think they should keep this, but I don't know if it's a bug. It also makes things like special delivery a little less appetizing. Now, don't get me wrong, special delivery has always been relatively good in terms of tuning. But the slow element of special delivery now becomes a little less appealing because we have access to something like still step coil. Special delivery was the only real way to get a really big slow on targets. 50% is pretty sizable. The only thing that was bigger is if you were running crashing momentum with Wind's Reach, but that's not a thing. Just don't even think about it. So yeah, anyways, that is like, I don't know if it's a bug. But if it is a bug, it's a good one, and I like it, but that's pretty much it. So next we have Empty the Cellar. I've seen a couple people ask if they fixed this yet. They unfortunately have not. It still tends to target mobs that you're not in combat with. which can obviously be an issue. So if we come over here, I'm only going to throw a keg at this pack. I'm then going to exploding keg, and then when I reactivate, you're going to see these kegs get thrown all around onto random targets that we don't care to be in combat with. So a little unlucky. So hopefully they fix that. Now I did run this in a couple dungeons. It's not that problematic. You just have to be aware of your positioning, which obviously you don't want to have to worry about that, you know? I ran it in Skyreach. There was a few moments where it pulled extra mobs that I didn't want to. But with like a proper positioning and moving away from packs you don't want pulled, you can then reactivate this. Now, the other thing is that the ability just doesn't feel that strong compared to something like Fuel on the Fire. Fuel on the Fire does an insane amount of your damage overall, where Empty the Cellar feels a little bit more single target focused, but the cooldown recovery that it offers doesn't feel that impactful. It's 2.5 seconds from all 5 kegs being thrown. Keg Smash is already giving you a bunch of like 3 seconds off. So it's worth less than a keg smash. So I'm not a big fan of this in particular. I don't know what they could do to improve this. I feel like I've seen this argument too. So shout out to people in Discord and comment sections, but I generally agree with this. I think they could bake Keg Volley into Exploding Keg, you know, and make that kind of a more major cooldown. And then they could probably split this capstone so you could technically run both, and that might feel a little bit better. I don't think Empty the Cellar is worthy of being a choice with Fuel on the Fire, because Fuel on the Fire just feels like so much better to play. So yeah, that being bugged is a little sad. And then the last bug, it's not even a bug, it's like just annoys me. It's this Awaken the Spirit or Awakening Spirit. The tooltip isn't clear. That's it. Like, it works. It mitigates damage. But if I Purify, you'll see that I gain the buff. But it just says Awakening Spirit. That's it. It doesn't show you how much damage you're absorbing, or pretty much anything. And you'll pretty much always have it. But because we can't see the numbers, I don't know if it's like overriding each other, but you can see like it does healing, like it works. It's just without like a clear tooltip. It's just it's a little like I want to be able to gauge how it like fully operates, and I can't do that without seeing the number being adjusted whenever we do cast Purify, how much it's absorbing. It's obviously absorbing 50% of staggered damage up to a certain prevented amount, but is it stacking? How high can it stack for? It'd be nice to be able to see it on the tooltip. Outside of that, I don't think there's any major bugs or major flaws, at least from what I can tell. So let's talk about some of the dungeons. So I jumped into a Skyreach actually yesterday, for example, and I want to talk about this first pull. This first pull, I tried to do like fairly big. It was like, 6 targets. I could have pulled more. But you're going to see me activate Exploding Keg here. And then you're going to see the kegs get thrown off to the side, pulling in more trash. So this is kind of where Empty the Cellar becomes problematic. Now, in terms of how good the tank actually feels to play, the rotation feels very like fluid. Everything kind of fits together nicely. It feels very, very, very identical to how it feels currently in Midnight. So if you're someone who's worried about the Brewmaster rework making it play differently, it definitely doesn't. I will say this though, Celestial Brew or Celestial Infusion feels so incredibly weak in its current state. Because they removed Purified Chi, Celestial Brew no longer scales. They tried to balance it to make it, I would throw it in the ballpark as if you were using a Celestial Brew with like maybe 1 or 2 stacks of Purified Chi, but I just don't even think it does that. There'll be times where I hit Celestial Brew or Celestial Infusion and it's gone immediately. And then at the end of a dungeon, we'll look at like the overall breakdown of what Celestial Brew or Celestial Infusion does in terms of healing, and it's like nil. It doesn't, it's like my 5th or 6th healing over the course of an entire run, being beat out by Celestial Fortune, Nizao's Resolve, Gift of the Ox, etc. So besides that, everything else feels good. The thing that I'm a little concerned with is how little cooldowns we have access to now. At least playing Shado-pan, the Black Ox feels like an offensive cooldown for the most part, even though it has defensive capabilities. And then it's Fortifying Brew. And Fortifying Brew is anywhere between like a 2 and 3 minute cooldown based on whichever, I guess, like little extension node you're playing, whether it's Fortification or you're playing Iron Shell Brew. Based on which one you run, it changes the length of the cooldown. But if you run one, it's a 30% DR. If you run the other, it's a 20% DR. And that small of a DR feels weird. Currently, Stagger's sitting around 71% while in combat with our current item level, or scaling in these keys. Pretty good. But right now on live, we're sitting around that 80% mark, 79 to 81, kind of depending. Upwards of 83, I guess, if you really get into like massive agility amps plus determination. So yeah, I don't know. Not having like any cooldowns feels really odd. I feel like I'd like something a little bit bigger. I'd like Dampen Harm back, but not the scaling version of Dampen Harm. Just like give us Dampen Harm and make it like a 2-minute cooldown, 40% DR. Just like give us something. Like that's kind of my only caveat. Because of Celestial Brew feeling weaker, I tried to end up playing with talents that gave me more throughput over time. I played with both Resolve and just regular Expel Harm. While the burst healing from Expel Harm can feel good, it feels incredibly weak in its current state, especially with how small Celestial Brew and Celestial Infusion ends up feeling. So Resolve felt better because at lower health thresholds, I was able to have like a healthier hot on me. But when it comes to like tank busters and stuff, for most of the runs, I never really felt in danger. But it also was contingent on the healer not being shit, I guess. One thing that is kind of unique is Breath of Fire's like back. I ran an Algathar, and because of our tier set giving us an amp, I was running Dragonfire Brew, and with how it interacts with our Blackhawk's cooldown when playing Shado-pan, and how it interacts with Vital Flame. Dude, holy shit. Breath of Fire feels so good in these big pulls, and it ends up doing more damage than Keg Smash. So you have this like really consistent on-demand threat at all times. Plus getting resets with Salsalabim Strength and from Keg Volley makes Exploding Keg feel even a little bit more potent than it normally does. And yeah, you just end up pumping healing, pumping damage. Everything is super great. And so I ran an Algathar, and Algathar is like a fairly big pull, or fairly big pull sizes. You also have bosses like the Overgrown Ancient who have, you know, tons of ad waves that are spawning constantly. So with the pull sizes being fairly big, I think Breath of Fire, between its direct damage, the damage over time, and Dragonfire Brew being accompanied like together, and the fact that it's also contributing a fair bit to Flurry Strike proccing during the cow window, during our Black Ox, it's like, it just feels like Breath of Fire is like your main ability. So it's like this little setup game where you Keg Smash into Breath, and like that's your damage event. And then you Blackout Kick into Tiger Palm, and then that's your damage event. And overall feels really good. What's also nice is the change to high tolerance. This is something that I kind of forgot to mention, is whenever you get elevated stagger. So whenever you see a massive increase in percentage from going from like 20% to 50% stagger, your Purifying Brew will like, it'll flash. And then if you hit it while it's flashing and you use it, if you are playing 1 or 2 stacks of high tolerance, it's going to reduce the cooldown of your Purifying Brew significantly, which means you get a lot more casts of Purifying Brew, which means more damage from something like Special Delivery, which means if you're playing Celestial Flame, fire damage, which bakes into Vital Flame. So it all feels really good together. My major complaint right now on beta is that Mythic, or the details meters, are not working appropriately. Staggered damage counts for both our healing done and our damage being dealt. So damage that's being dealt to us through stagger counts as our damage done, and any stagger that we remove by purifying or by gaining shuffle through things like Quicksip just means that that's counting on the healing. So in a lot of these pulls in Algathar and Skyreach and these other runs that I might be showing on screen, if you see me popping off, just know that anywhere between 20 to 50% of that damage that is being dealt on my meter for me is actually me taking damage. And same with healing. And I don't know if everyone on beta understands this about Brewmaster right now, because there's been some very sour DPS players who are like, why is the tank beating me? Or healers who are like, why am I being out healed by a Brewmaster monk? And while Brewmaster has been able to have fairly high capable throughput in the past and can currently on live, it's contingent on a lot of different factors. But with this, it's like right now on like the Overgrown Ancient, for example, I'm doing 71,000 HPS compared to the Druid who is doing 22k. But it's because I am taking so much damage from the Tank Buster, from all the ads hitting me, from the poison, that, and the group's not really taking damage, that it looks like I'm kind of doing everything. And then same thing with the damage being done. Obviously, we have Hunter and DH who are shining. The Paladin, though, is doing fine damage. I am not doing 85k. I'm doing more like 60k or 55k. So I'm hoping Blizzard updates this. Now, don't get me wrong. I like seeing the damage that I take from stagger, just not as DPS. And it's interesting seeing how much healing I'm doing through stagger. I think being showing dropped stagger as a form of healing is an interesting metric to be able to look at easily. But I think it provides this like false sense of security or gratification when you're like, oh man, I'm doing 80k HPS to myself. I'm never going to die. But it's like, well, you're not really. Like, you're still taking a lot of damage. You're just purifying a shitload. So yeah, that's kind of like my major complaint right now. I didn't get to play much with Master of Harmony. I did it a little bit on stream on Tuesday. I was playing this really interesting build in game, which I can try to show you or explain. So let me do like a new loadout. We'll do MOH Vivify. I don't know how I feel about this. So what you end up doing is I am in combat. What? Am I just going to be forever in combat? The Silvermoon training dummies are so bugged. Let me log out. Okay, so let's swap this over. So what you do is you play Master of Harmony. You also then play down, you play pretty much all the same talents that we've already been playing. But because we're not going to be doing Tiger Palm, we actually are going to play Path of Resurgence. So all of our damage, Chi Burst increases the damage that we get stored. It gives us like a buff basically, so everything we deal is going to be good. And so let's apply these changes. And then we are actually going to swap over to Press the Advantage. And so the idea with this build is that instead of casting, because we no longer have Tiger Palm, you're instead going to cast Vivify. Now, you might be thinking, well, like, that's fucking stupid. So they have changed Vivacious, you might be right. They've changed Vivacious oh my god. They've changed Vivacious Vivification to allow Keg Smash to make your next Vivify become instant cast. Now, what's unique about this is that Rising Sun Kick, while it was scaling with haste, was naturally a longer cooldown. Therefore, you would be able to cast this less often. It's now contingent on Keg Smash, which also has a haste scaling component. So you could stack a little bit of haste in theory to make this lower, but every 7 seconds, you're able to follow up a Keg Smash with a Vivify, expelling your Harmonic Surge casts. Of course, I get disconnected when I'm trying to explain this. Let's try to log back in. Blizzard saw that I was trying to run the most atrocious build in the game, and they kicked me. I've been disconnected. Did my internet go out? Oh. Okay, that's cool. All right, we wait. Okay, 30 minutes later, I'm back. Okay, anyways, like I was saying, your whole kind of gimmick now with this build is that instead of Tiger Palming, like we've been used to, we are simply just going to use Vivify as a filler. And so there's definitely some changes you can make in the tree, but for like just a quick little reference, I will kind of show you what the rotation ends up looking like. So the unique thing about the change to Master of Harmony is that potential energy / this Harmonic Surge debuff or buff, I guess, will be expelled whenever you cast not only Tiger Palm, but also Vivify. So the idea is that even though you are playing Press the Advantage, you can freely cast Vivify to expel those Harmonic Surge stacks. So here we go. Keg Smash, you can see like the nice little, little proc buff thing above my character, and then when I again cast Vivify, you're going to see those little golden celestial type things come out of my character into other players, healing them and ideally doing damage. Now the weird thing is I think it does look like it tends, oh no, it hits them, sorry, it looks like it was only healing, but it looks like it is doing damage here. So yeah, that is kind of the odd thing. Now the problem with this is that you still run into the issue of you tend to overstack when you are in combat taking damage using Celestial Brew often. Like even right here, I just hit, like I'm already at 5 stacks again. I've only been able to Vivify, once, because you can only do it every time you cast Hex Smash, just once, because it's making it free. So I'm not sure if this build really works. It didn't feel all that great in Mythic Plus, if I'm being honest. The damage of the Harmonic Surge, especially in AoE, feels a little lackluster, probably a little better in single target specifically. I was trying to figure out a way to make Harmonic Surge not Harmonic Surge, Press the Advantage actually work. So overall, not a big fan of the way that Master of Harmony plays. With specifically press the advantage, it feels just the same if you're playing, obviously, something like Blackout combo. So yeah. Did it not save my original build? What the heck? I guess the last thing I kind of want to talk about is going to be the Apex talents. I did play with them. I'm just not a fan of how they feel. It's a little RNG with the original talent, and then as you kind of build upon it, it'll start to ricochet, but then you feel like you lose the value of the ricochet in like single target encounters. And while you do more physical damage, which is all good, if you are thinking about like, oh man, it could be cleaving, but it's not, that's kind of a problem. Now, again, a solution that I've seen get offered is that if there is not an additional target for it to cleave to, it should just bounce to the same target, or it can maybe bounce off of friendlies, either healing them or using it as like a bounce for chi wave, or similar to chi wave, where it'll then bounce back at the enemy. I'd like to see this talent not get wasted in single target. Refreshing Drink can be powerful whenever you do pop Celestia Brew, but it's kind of contingent on whatever kind of combat state you're in. If you're on a fight that doesn't have a lot of AoE damage going on and not a lot of group damage, it feels a little irrelevant and useless. It's decent healing to the Brewmaster themselves, but the real potency of Bring Me Another is going to come if you are also getting effective healing on other allies, which you're not always getting. So generally speaking, I've actually been ignoring the Apex talent altogether, utilizing these additional 4 points to build out more into the tree, which tends to, at least in my opinion, feel much, much better. So I've been running a build somewhat like this. I will leave maybe the import string down below so you can test it out for yourself. Actually, since my build didn't save, I don't even know if this is the right build, but I will post the build that I've been running down below if you'd like to test it out. I've been getting a lot of damage for like on Breath of Fire, which also means more damage with Vital Flame, and overall feels really, really, really good. So I'm happy with the state of Brewmaster in this current state. Again, I'd like to see some bug fixes. I'd like to see some adjustments to the damage meters that are in game. Of course, there's some UI stuff that I'm still having problems with, but I'll save that for another video. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this little breakdown and my thoughts on Brewmaster. Let me know what you think down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.